Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Building Your Identity-Aware Infrastructure. I'm Shay Mann, and I will be your moderator. Today's webinar is in listen-only mode, so if you have any questions throughout the event, please submit those in the Q&A panel, and we will answer them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. This session will be recorded, and we will email you a link to the recorded version tomorrow. Joining us today is SailPoint's Chief Technology Officer and Chief Information Security Officer, Darren Rolls. And with that, Darren, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you to get us started.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everybody. As always, great to be with you. Love doing these things live. There's nothing quite like being live online, right? So the topic for today's webinar is building your identity-aware infrastructure. And I think several of you may have heard me in the past speak several times on the idea of putting identity at the center of security. And today we tend to talk about that idea of being at the center in terms of identity awareness. And that really means making the rest of the IT and security infrastructure identity aware. So that is our topic for today, exactly how we here at SailPoint are helping you build your identity-aware infrastructure. Now, to kick things off, as always, let's review a little bit of exactly where we are in identity and access management today. I think many of you on this webinar have probably been in this space for as long as I have. And so, like me, you've seen exactly how much things really have changed. Identity management itself has moved from being about tools and frameworks to being about an open platform. And that is a platform that now truly sits at the center of IT and security operations. The conversation around identity and access management has also moved from simple administrative delegation, allowing other people to carry out actions for you, to true controls and an end-to-end approach to governance. And that is governance that absolutely today has to cover all apps, all users, and all access. Security is the principle of the weakest link, and so the things we don't have governance over are inherently that weakness. And this makes what we do here in identity and access management an essential part of the critical infrastructure. It's now integrated with everything, and it's a truly strategic part of how we all do business. It's certainly no boardroom do we enter today where somebody says identity what, as we may have done maybe 10 or 15 years ago. But for all this change, the goals of what we're trying to do really do remain the same. Security itself today is defined by the access control model. It's the application access. And identity and access management is the thing responsible for making sure that all access control models give the right people the right access to the right data. Getting that access right is business agility and all kinds of good things, and getting it wrong is all kinds of bad things and can be very, very expensive. Obviously, lots of examples of that. So most CIOs that I talk to today very clearly and fully understand the value of what we do, creating a business process front end for that access governance process and building the platform for a full administrative lifecycle and delivering fundamentally sustainable controls and audit for all access. And of course, it's really easy to put those three things up there on the top of a PowerPoint chart, right? I mean, it's three little ticks, and you know, how hard was that? But unfortunately, I think as many of you will know, access control is actually quite tricky to manage, and what looks so simple, you know, people and access and data, is actually a lot more complicated. For a start, it's not just people access that we have to worry about, it's application and device access too. And it's not just application data that we control access to, it's structured and unstructured data too, so files sitting on file systems. So understanding and managing this access is actually pretty darn complicated. And when we ask our business users to take responsibility over it, they often get confused. There's a lot of technology here and there's a lot of detail in the things that we simply call access. So I often like to break things down into its three composite parts. I know we're kind of going back to basics here, but it sets a good foundation around authentication, authorization, and administration. And authentication is, as we all know, the simple process or action of verifying the identity of a user, an application, device, or process. It's based on issued credentials. It provides a basic yes-no result, if you like, a response at the time of access, and it's generally mapped back to sets of accounts and privileges that are connected to it. Now, the point for putting that here is because there are just lots of forms of authentication. There's PKI and digital certificate-based authentication. There's good old password, right, that never seems to be going away. There's web, biometrics, there's just basically lots of these things. And unfortunately, the average enterprise seems to be hanging on to them all. There's lots of systems of authentication, and all of these must be managed and audited by the business. Now, on the other side, we've got this access picture. We've got authorization, and Wikipedia defines that as the action or fact of authorizing or being authorized to access something. It's not a bad definition, I guess. I like to think of it as being the actual access control that's embedded in or is close to the applications and the data. Now, regardless of how it's authenticated, it's usually based upon some form of an account that's provisioned and deprovisioned. It's generally defined by assigned entitlements for those accounts, and it's all about making complex, fine-grained decisions about who can have access. Like authentication, there's just lots of them. We would love there to be just one, but there's not. Application-specific models, things like permission sets in Salesforce, groups and roles, attribute-based authorization, all kinds of stuff, including things, let's not forget, things like authorization provided in vaults, in vaulted credentials in a PAM solution. All of these systems of authentication and authorization together are the access control layer. And it's our job in identity and access governance to administer and audit all of that stuff. Provisioning, lifecycle controls, automation, self-service, and sustainable compliance proof. And only through that effective and holistic governance over both sides of that are we actually able to answer the question who has access to what and why they have that access. And if you can provide business level control over who does have access, and you can say with business certainty, and that's kind of tricky, who should have access, then you have something that we at SailPoint call identity context. And I've got to tell you, in a flashy chart, identity context is just gold. It means understanding the complex relationships that exist between people, access, and data across that simple line. It means providing a concrete model for the state of an entitlement, this thing we now call an entitlement. It provides us these defined policies and controls, and it captures the meaning, and it's kind of interesting, the history as well of authentication and authorization configuration, and that's what we do, right? It turns out that this is absolutely critical data that today is helping us drive security, and it's absolutely key to building out this notion of your own identity-aware infrastructure. Now, I said several times identity-aware infrastructure, but lots of easy terms to throw around, but what exactly does that mean? Well, it actually means a couple of things. It means making security policies more identity-aware, so that's our security infrastructure, making it aware of identity. And on the other side of it, making identity policies more security aware. This is a bidirectional relationship. Making an identity aware infrastructure statement means both sides of that. So to give it, a nice bullet pointed list, it means understanding and sharing that thing that we've just described as identity context. It means being connected to everything, being integrated with key security and operational systems, and being responsive when things change, right? When things actually move around in the environment. It means providing more informed governance, and governance that is enriched by the events and information that's being passed to it from other parts of that infrastructure, right? Making our identity more security aware. And it means enhancing our security operations with the richness of identity context, right? Letting people actually know who people really are, what access means. Darren's in a group. What the heck does that mean? What does it mean he has access to? That is what we're really talking about here. And that is empowering the rest of IT to be more identity aware, because that is the new perimeter, as we often say. And of course, enabling end users access to make sure, like we were saying, the right people get the right access at the right time, and driving visibility, controls and audit for all systems and all data enterprise-wide. Now, that in itself is a lot about what identity-aware infrastructure means, but how? I mean, that's always the question, you know, how are you and I both, because I'm a CISO here too, myself, right? How am I going to get there? How am I going to deliver this principle? And to us here at SailPoint, put my CTO's hat back on, it comes down to three simple things: an open platform, an open program, and an open approach. And so let's walk through each of those, and I'll give you a bit of a clearer picture. The first is that open platform, and it's something that definitely we own, and here at SailPoint in our products. It's something that we've been delivering on for several years in product and product roadmaps. Those of you that have been with us for a while will have seen pictures like this before. And it means taking the core capabilities of what identity governance is, so things like certifications, things on the top there, lifecycle management, password management, data access governance, and identity analytics, and delivering them on top of an open integration framework. And so by that, we mean APIs, plugins, and SDKs that can create a reusable set of platform capabilities that can be leveraged by not just us in our application development tools and capabilities, but by our customers, by our deployment partners, and by a growing ecosystem. I use that system very deliberately, an ecosystem of integrated vendor solutions, all building on top of those APIs, plugins, and SDKs. So the open platform is fundamentally a set of capabilities and a foundation for the next building block, which is an open program. And for us, an open program really has a name. It's called the Identity Plus Alliance, but there's a lot more to it than that. It's an alliance of like-minded industry-leading vendors. And these are vendors that have come together to create an integrated ecosystem based on our open platform. The Identity Plus Alliance creates four key things: a structured program of participation and licensing. It gives a managed community, which is very, very important, a place that partners can talk, customers can talk to partners, and we can all communicate. A set of certified integrations. We do have a fairly extensive certification program now, so these integrations can be graded, secured, and certified. And of course, a customer support model. As partners bring in key pieces of integration, it has to be usable in a key end, complete end-to-end support model for the customer. So it's those four key things. The program itself actually defines categories of integration that basically help enable this idea of an identity-aware infrastructure. I'll walk around these categories just briefly, won't give too much detail. We'll get into a couple of them as we go through. But first category there, privileged account management, where we're providing integration controls and governance for the leading PAM vendors. There's an access management category where we're taking things like strong authentication, SSO, access assurance, and we're making them integrated, governed, and managed in context. There's a systems management collection, which is connecting things like availability monitoring, so as that both sides of availability are more state aware. In identity, we want to know when a resource isn't available, and when a resource is having a problem, wouldn't it be nice to say who had access to that resource? Sounds so simple, but there it is. There's a security incident and event management category where we're delivering context out to the SIEM tools and vendors and receiving back status and response actions through a framework that we call ADAM, which is a very interesting new way for us to bring in events and provide context back out. There's a service management category integrating the flow of change and incident tickets for provisioning themselves and for remediations and governance. There's a UEBA category, again, sharing that context and meaning. Yes, we have our own identity analytics capabilities. Those analytics capabilities create even smarter identity context, which can then be shared with the rest of the behavioral security environment. There's a master data management category as well, where we're providing greater insight and reach into enterprise data. And then finally, there's a mobile device management category, where we're extending governance and provisioning beyond the desktop application and the server out to the mobile device endpoint as well. And of course, not to forget, over on to the right-hand side there, it also includes a program, as I said, of support and certification for our deployment partners. Because these guys are busy out there creating certified plugins, right? They're creating plugins that extend our solution to meet new use cases and deliver new functionality that we haven't even thought of, right? They're building on that platform and they're delivering solutions, and the program brings them into an overarching support and assurance environment for the SailPoint customer. Now, the third and final building block in this identity-aware infrastructure is an open approach. And this one really is a little more fuzzy, you might say, a little kind of more touchy-feely. It really comes down to how we as a vendor think about openness, competition, and the overlaps that happen in the environment. When you look at the world of identity governance administration, nicely seated at the center there with structured and unstructured data, you see that it's surrounded by lots of really interesting technology. I find all this stuff fascinating. And it's also very adjacent, I would say, much more overlapping to some very important technologies that really touch in a very meaningful way identity and access management in a way we have to understand. And some of these solutions are so strategic to identity governance that they really change the way we think about it, but it doesn't mean we're actually doing them. And it's kind of an interesting thing as we're a very aggressive company when it comes to innovation. And a lot of the time for us, it's about deciding what we don't do. Not what we do, it's what we don't do. And sometimes it means not doing the things that are in these areas that affect us in a very meaningful way, but integrating with them. An absolutely great example of this is taking an open approach to working with privileged account management systems rather than doing it ourselves, right? And PAM is a very interesting, again, very competitive market. There's a bunch of great solutions out there that lead their markets in certain functional areas, and all of these solutions require the same kinds of business process control, administration, lifetime, and life cycle, and controls and governance. Right? And this is the same stuff that we're already providing for everything else. These are other systems of access that require management. Pretty simple, really. And like all systems that push out access to things that we care about, it's got to be consistent and sustainable and governed, right? And that's really what it comes down to, because weakest link, right? So as part of our commitment to that open approach, we announced a couple of weeks back, 3 weeks ago I think now, a new way of integrating and governing PAM solutions. It's our PAM management module. It does a lot more than just connecting to the PAM systems via a SCIM interface. It actually creates a whole new operational paradigm, and this is kind of interesting, a new way of thinking about and managing the life cycle of things that we generically call containers now, which are the vaults and safes that are in the PAM solutions. It means providing full visibility into those container access, right? Allowing specific users to pivot from an identity-centric view in identity to a container or vault-centric view. Right? This is what we need to do. The vault is a system of access. We can pivot in the PAM module to look at that access in a very vault-specific way. It means providing automated join and move and lever functions for the container assignment. It means making containers requestable units of access, right? So they appear in our access request, just like everything else, ready for our role engineering and self-service access request functions. It means providing full container composition and assignment certification. Gee, there's a big old container here full of stuff that I'm giving out. What does it mean to have that access? Doesn't that need certifying? Absolutely it does. And that allows us to get visibility into the vaults and provide preventative and detective controls, the kind of things we understand in governance. And that is really the notion of end-to-end governance. All of this extra capability ends up changing the way you think about building vaults and safes in the first place. It really allows us to promote least privilege by allowing the creation of smaller vaults, vaults that individually contain less stuff, if you like, more things in them, because we can easily and securely assign, manage, and audit them. So like I say, really is a bit of a change the way we think about the separation between governance and vaulting, and that all comes with the PAM module itself, and it's part of our open approach and our commitment really to openness and innovation. Second example I'll give you here of an open approach is how we now look at access management itself. So that's technologies like SSO, federation, and strong authentication. This one is super close to home and really brings to bear this point of taking an open approach and working with everyone. An open approach to governing access management really means working with the leading vendors in the space, again, another group of people at the bottom there. Of course, probably listening here, there are customers that have our own SSO stack. But we're now committed to supporting all of the leading providers with integration points from all of our products. So we're doing this because the truth is, just authentication and authorization, there's many of them. You've got more than one of them. Here at SailPoint, we've got more than one form. It's just how it works, right? It's just where we end up. And so it's our job to integrate with all of them to enable common business process, manageable admin lifecycle, and controls and audit, right? Those three simple bubbles at the top. So basically, we're delivering consistency, sustainability and governance, regardless of the provider and the deployment model, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. So we're happily marching our way along the path here, building out access management integrations and delivering them in both Identity IQ and Identity Now. And to give it its nice little bulleted list of capabilities, full visibility into access management assignments, automated JML, join and move and lever, for the tiles and the launchers that actually provide the access in an SSO world, creating roles and entitlements that make tiles requestable units. Again, doesn't this all sound similar? Providing integrated password management, preventive and detective controls, and end-to-end governance, right? Governance that puts the business user in control of what is basically, it's just yet another form of access, right? We quite often have this sort of strange intellectual conversation with folks. They say, but SSO doesn't really need management, does it? We say, absolutely it does. It's yet another form of access. So it's really this idea of an open platform, an open program, and an open approach that come together to help us build this identity-aware infrastructure. And I've talked quite a bit about what it means now what it is and what it means to create an identity-aware infrastructure, but how is it actually delivered? So let's just quickly, in the last 5-10 minutes here, look at what you can actually do with it, because it's really what it counts, right? It's nice to have it on a shelf, but what can you do with it once you've got it? Let's quickly walk through an operational scenario that covers just some of them. We can't really get it all in. Happy to follow up with the Q&A when we get there. So let's take an operational scenario, and it's going to start with Billy. So who the heck is Billy? He's just some guy, right? I've just chosen him. In fact, he's a photograph of the internet. He may, I'm not really sure who he is, but let's assume that Billy's been with the company for quite a while, been there since graduation, let's just say, and works on the web content team, knows everybody in IT and across the company, been employed long enough for entitlement creep to really kick in. And so Billy's out there with lots of accounts and lots of access. He's connected to the company's EMM solution, mobile management solution, with his own personal iPhone device. He's got a single sign-on access management account in the Azure cloud. He's got access to accounts on-prem, and he has an enterprise PAM solution access. It's giving him access to the production web servers for publishing content. He's got multiple SaaS accounts, and access to lots of file shares that contain all kinds of important company data and PII. Usual situation. Billy is not unusual in most of the businesses. Now, unfortunately, our story is going to start, as it often does with such things, with vulnerability and exploitation. Sadly, Billy used his company laptop to download some dubious content. That content contained a 0-day vulnerability. Basically, Billy got owned, and the bad guys got a keylogger wedged into his desktop, so not good. And so when Billy came into work and accessed his SSO account and his PAM vault and the company's file servers, the bad guys were watching, and they now had access to everything. One of the malware packages that they deployed contained a variant of WannaCry. We're setting up, obviously, a bad scenario here. So it started encrypting content on the finance share, something that really does happen, right? Now, this is where the identity-aware infrastructure can kick in and start providing some enhanced detection. Fortunately, in our scenario, Security IQ, our data access governance solution, was watching that finance share, watching it like a hawk, as they say. So it immediately noticed that there were odd things happening, odd behavior, and the telltale signature of ransomware exploit file encryption was happening. At the same time, Identity IQ started picking up lifecycle triggers. As the bad guys used Billy's accounts to pull lateral movement and escalation of privileges within the rest of the environment that was identity aware, alarm bells started going off, which is very good. Now, you'll notice that I've elected to put Identity IQ in there as the provisioning and governance seat, as it were, for this particular scenario. The truth is, it could have been Identity Now, our cloud platform, wearing the IGA gloves, as it were. Much of what we're talking about is available in both products. I simply chose Identity IQ because it fitted better. I just put it on there. With that said, let's now also throw in there Identity AI too. So our identity analytics and behavior assessment offering, and see that all three solutions are integrated and working together. So that's our identity-aware ecosystem, ready and creating a much smarter governance and enhanced set of controls. And as you might expect, all of this data that's available in the IAM governance tier is available as identity context, the relationships, the state, the events, the history, the policies, and the control and configuration is all available to the rest of our connected infrastructure. So our identity-aware infrastructure is listening and consuming that context. So with that context in hand, they use it. They each get to consume the context and where available to drive actions themselves and to share status back with us, right? That's what this means, this bi-directional relationship. And that's going to enable even more informed governance, basically. So let's think now about a response, right? What does an identity-aware infrastructure response look like? And Security IQ started that by basically suspending Billy's AD account. As soon as those file signatures were detected, the account was disabled, and this basically stopped any further spread of the file encryption. Shockingly effective way of controlling the proliferation of such vulnerabilities. Then using the new alerts model in Identity IQ and the ADAM framework, we get instant visibility into events coming from the log and SIM tier, right? Absolutely essential. And this is then able to trigger a bump up in Billy's incident and identity risk score, and that pushes critical file classification and access configuration information out to the CASB and DLP tier, right? So we know something's bad going on, so we push our file classification information out to share with that with those systems. And this allows a Symantec or a McAfee or something else that's out there to make just basically more informed block and mitigation decisions, right? Everybody's sharing in this identity-aware ecosystem view. And finally, our enhanced identity context is then used to enrich the Microsoft Azure AD instance that's out there controlling the single sign-on to the key cloud application systems. So Azure then enforces a different MFA policy for all of Billy's current and future sessions. And this can shut down access real-time, as well as ensuring that stronger authentication is used next time Billy tries to log into the system. Story's not over yet, of course, as you might imagine. Now it's time for some really enhanced controls and governance. So governance is going to force the recertification of the affected PAM vaults. Let's just recertify everything, make sure everything is still clean and as it should be. Let's put attestation and policy checks in for all of our key systems, all the touch systems on-prem and in the cloud. Let's make sure that we've not got escalation of privilege. And then take a full review of everything Billy has access to. We can automatically create that certification, send it to his manager. Something happened last night. Let's take a real close look at Billy before he gets access back to any systems. And lastly, let's not make it all about systems and infrastructure. It's always good to do something to create a better end user experience for everyone touching our systems. So with that smarter self-service available when other users of affected systems in our scenario come to make access requests, they're going to get stronger approvals, right? We're in a state of alert, and so we're going to triple certify everything because we know what happens. The bad guys get a footprint. Operationally, they exfiltrate through escalation of privileges. So let's trap that down. And then also when Billy finally does get his identity back, we hope that happens, we'll just make sure that we've reset all of his passwords, right? We see everything in every system, so therefore let's just reset everything with the automation layer for that. With the new identity analytics and intelligence capabilities in hand, we can provide vastly enhanced peer group and outlier assessment here. So we can allow managers to make much faster and much more intelligent decisions with this technology. So it's about making people's lives better. And of course, that data access governance gives us something unique, the notion of a data owner that we can then engage much earlier in the security process, allowing them to provide the vital context that probably they only understand, right? Our data owners are something now that are very critical to the overall control life cycle for the data that they own. We can help our help desk staff finally have visibility into the access of the people they're talking to, right? It's just a person on the end of a phone, I've got a problem. We now can give them knowledge of who somebody is, what they have access to, how they got that access, and what they're doing with that access. I mean, that's just a help desk dream for sure. And this can really change the way our security staff as well think about investigation and response to incident, right? They're getting smarter information. They have access to that context. They're part of the identity-aware infrastructure. It just makes their life much better. And last but by no means least, let's come back to enhancing the experience of our poor compliance and audit staff, right? They're so often, the butt of our jokes and of our frustration, but absolutely essential. Gee, as a CISO, I spend a lot of my time with Gary, who runs that for us. But giving these people the visibility, controls, and governance is just so badly needed when it comes time to turn back on our systems after an event. Are we under control? Do we have compliance? Are we ready to resume our business? And that's pretty much where you have it. That is the identity-aware infrastructure. It's running on an open platform, it's empowered by an open program, and it's delivered via an open approach. And it's an open approach that puts governance and the power of identity back at the center, creating an identity-aware infrastructure that's going to enhance that user experience and deliver visibility, controls, and governance, something I hope we're all looking for. So with that, I will pass over to Shay for some questions.
Great, thank you, Darren. Okay, just a friendly reminder, if you have a question, go ahead and submit that in the Q&A panel on the side of your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can in the allotted time. So let's not delay and go ahead and jump in. Our first question, Darren, is you described integration with SIEM solutions. Can you provide some more detail around that?
Yeah, certainly. That's so we've defined a new. It's part of this idea of creating an SDK, if you like, really. Right, we've always had APIs available so as that we can pass information backwards and forwards. But what we've done with our SIEM integration is created a framework we call ADAM, and that's Active Detection Mitigation. I can't get the acronym right now. It basically means it's an infrastructure system for us to truly capture the use case for the integration. When we've got these varying complex, SIM systems out there, so you've got a Splunk, for example, out there doing log interpretation, it comes up with what it thinks of as an event. It's able to send it to us. We can then log that and have it trigger lifecycle events, basically. So it's a very nice, neat, controlled, and I always use this word, sustainable. It's got to be manageable over time. Integration point between very noisy, chatty SIM and very action-oriented identity management. So yeah, that's fundamentally the ADAM framework. Okay,
great. All right, next question. You described the governance of privileged user management systems. Can you provide a little more information about the SCIM interface?
Okay, yeah, certainly. That was just an unfortunately small box on the bottom of the picture there. We've had integration with leading PAM vendors for some considerable time. What we've done as part of the PAM module is we've standardized, if you like, the conversation between the governance tier and the Vault container tier, the Vault Safe tier. Using Simple Cloud Identity Management, the SCIM standard. That is an RFC. So I often very simplistically call it like LDAP over REST. But it really is the CRUD operations, the RESTful CRUD operations for identity management assignments now. So we've standardized that, and we're pushing through the SCIM committee some standardized profiling and extended schema for SCIM for PAM, so as you can represent your vaults and safes and containers in a meaningful way. And that means the vendors are then supporting an open standard. They're not just supporting us. And we get to, in effect, just have one connector, which is very good for us. So it's good for everybody, and it's open standards based, and there probably couldn't be a better way of doing it.
Excellent.
If that helps.
Okay, next question. What are your recommendations for integrating different IAM tools?
Okay, that's an interesting one. I didn't actually address that here in this flow. I kind of did a little bit by pointing to the PAM. We are ourselves a form of access control in some ways, right? Because we're giving out access, and as I say, people have frequently got lots of identity management tools. There are some definite, clear, well-exercised best practices here when you're bringing together a legacy, let's call it legacy, a historical identity management solution with something like a SailPoint. And really it comes down to layering. It's very important, if you possibly can, to isolate certain use cases. One of the ones we'll quite often see is just overlaying a single access request environment on top of, you may have a legacy Oracle environment. You're bringing in the SailPoint environment to sort of take over from that. One of the first use cases you might do is just put access request on top and move all of the use cases of access to one place at a time. So there's some very definite best practices. What you don't want is some horrible meshed model, as you say, everything talking to everything. If you can get some simplification by use case, that's probably the best place to start. But that's a good question, because it really is a reflection of the real world where people are, right? This technology is in migration, and we're part of that migration process. So,
great. Okay. Darren, you discussed about PAM. Does SailPoint integrate with Physical Access Management System, or PACs?
Yes, we do. We don't have a large stable of direct connectors ourselves. It turns out that most of those physical access systems are either driven by or derived from another resource. So, for example, I put people in Active Directory groups, and that's what gives them the relevant door. You quite often see each area of a building that's physically controlled represented as a group in Active Directory. I'm not a big fan of that model, to be honest, but it's how the world really works. And then you're provisioning people in and out of those groups in order to give them access. So we see a lot of that in the field in general, because we've got so many different types. We can connect to databases and flat files and all kinds of things. So there's usually a way of provisioning and integrating with, so as you can pull the context in. Because again, I want to see, when I look at Shay's Cube, I also want to see, you have a badge for both of our buildings, right? That's kind of good for us to be able to see. I do want to come back to that. I did suggest there that it's not a good idea to put it in Active Directory. One of the problems, I always come down to this thing to say, what does it mean to have a piece of access? When you overload everything into Active Directory groups or into any form of group structure, it becomes sort of hard to manage. If you've got a governance solution like ours, you can catalog those groups and make sure that everybody knows that if I pop you in this group, you're going to get access to the other building. If you see what I'm saying, it's sort of hiding the access control model in other systems is usually something to unwind if you can. But to quickly answer the question, yes, we've got lots of integration. If you've got a specific system in mind, by all means, drop us a mail, and we can probably put you in touch with someone that's already integrated with it.
Got it. Great. Okay. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. In an identity-aware solution, how do you handle a generic ID, meaning an account that is shared or used by processes and can't be associated with a single individual?
Good question. My first take here would be a shout out to our PAM vendors. Right? Usually shared and system privileged accounts are vaulted and isolated. There are some kind of, let me take a step back. First of all, you absolutely should be able to make a decision as to who has access to that account, right? If there's a shared privileged account, you've got to be able to say who had access, how they got that access, and when it was used, right? One of the ways most people will address that is by putting a privileged user management system in. I then put that account in the vault, and then I share that vault with multiple people. Hence why it's very important that we integrate with that tier, because it's then controlling the access. Of course, you can directly associate accounts within the governance tier, and we see a lot of customers that do that, put their system privileged and shared accounts directly assigned to a cube. I am a fan of a layered security model. If you do have a PAM, a privileged account management solution, I would say do it there. And then control, like I said, with this much finer grained capability of managing a vault that we now have, it doesn't matter how many vaults you've got. That used to be you see, historically we used to see these sort of fat vaults, really, fat containers because it was really hard to assign the containers to people, so you tended to create bigger containers. And so there was always this issue, is it good to put these things in a now you can have as many vaults as you like, you know, and we can provision in and out of them, we can govern them, we can control them. And so the reasons not to use a PAM solution are becoming less. So it's probably best to put it there.
Great, thank you. Okay, that is all the time we have for questions. Keep an eye out for an email from us tomorrow that will include a recording of today's presentation. And if you'd like to learn more, please contact us using the information on your screen to get in touch with an identity expert. Thank you all for joining us today. Darren, thank you for your time, and have a great rest of your day.